The morning sun flooded the wide corridors of the Blackwell estate through floor-to-ceiling tempered glass windows. Sophia clutched her cleaning cloth tightly, carefully passing it over each marble surface as if polishing precious jewels. At 26 years old, she knew every corner of that house better than any of its residents. She had been working there for 3 years, ever since she left her hometown in rural Texas, in search of a better life in Manhattan. Her brown eyes reflected determination as she adjusted her dark hair tied in a simple bun. Sophia had delicate features that her mother used to say were inherited from her Mexican grandmother, and a smile that could light up any room, though she rarely displayed it in that house where she needed to maintain an impeccable professional demeanor. On the other side of the city, in a penthouse in Tribeca, Alexander Blackwell woke to the insistent sound of his alarm clock. At 32 years old, he was the living definition of success. With a degree in business administration from Wharton and an MBA from Harvard, he had taken over the family business at 25 after his father's premature death. Under his management, the Blackwell Group had tripled in size, expanding into international markets. Alexander had the kind of looks that made women sigh when they saw him pass by. Jet black hair always perfectly styled, piercing green eyes, a chiseled jawline, and an athletic body maintained through daily workouts with a personal trainer. He wore custom-made Italian suits and drove cars that cost more than many houses. His social life was a succession of charity galas, business dinners, and exclusive parties where he was always the center of attention. But behind his impeccable facade, Alexander carried an emptiness that all the money in the world couldn't fill. His relationships were superficial, involving women interested in his last name and bank account. No one seemed to see him as simply Alexander, only as the Blackwell heir. On that particular Friday morning, fate would begin weaving the threads that would unite those two distant worlds. Sophia was in the library of the mansion, her favorite part of the house. She loved observing the leather-bound books that lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Sometimes, when she was certain she was alone, she dared to pull a volume from the shelves and read a few pages, marveling at stories of places she would never visit. She was so focused on cleaning the highest shelves atop a ladder that she didn't hear the door open. Alexander had entered the mansion unexpectedly. Normally, he only appeared there on Wednesdays for weekly dinner with his mother, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwell, but he needed to retrieve some important documents he'd left in the office. As he passed by the library, something made him stop. Through the half-open door, he saw Sophia high up on the ladder, focused on her work. The morning light streaming through the window created a golden halo around her. She was humming softly, a gentle melody as she worked, and there was something about that scene that touched Alexander in a way he couldn't explain. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe, watching her for a moment. It was then that Sophia, reaching for a book that was out of place, lost her balance. "Watch out!" Alexander shouted, running toward her. Time seemed to slow down. Sophia felt herself falling, her heart racing, but before she could hit the ground, she felt strong arms catching her. She opened her eyes, which she had instinctively closed, and found herself staring directly into the most intense green eyes she had ever seen. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Sophia realized she was still in his arms, her face just inches from his. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that made her head spin. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell." She quickly stood up, smoothing her simple gray uniform, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful." "There's no need to apologize," Alexander said, picking up the book that had fallen to the floor. "You were just doing your job." He looked at the book's cover, a worn copy of Jane Eyre. "You like to read?" The question surprised Sophia. In 3 years working at the mansion, none of the Blackwells had ever asked her anything personal. "Yes, sir. When I have free time." "This is one of my mother's favorites," Alexander commented, flipping through the pages. "Have you read it?" Sophia hesitated. Should she admit that she sometimes borrowed books from the library? I've read a few pages, yes." Something in the way she said it made Alexander smile. A genuine smile, not the calculated one he displayed at social events. "You can borrow it if you'd like." I'm sure my mother wouldn't mind. That's very kind of you, Mr. Blackwell, but I couldn't— Alexander, he interrupted. Please call me Alexander, and I insist. He handed her the book. Sophia accepted it with trembling hands, feeling the worn leather cover. Thank you, Alexander. Their eyes met again, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to disappear around them. It was Eleanor Blackwell's voice echoing through the corridor that broke the spell. Alexander? Is that you, darling? I need to go, Sophia said quickly, clutching the book against her chest. Thank you again. She left the library quickly, her heart still racing. She didn't know if it was from the near fall or the intensity of those green eyes that seemed to see right through her. Alexander stood there for a moment watching her leave. Something had changed in that brief encounter, though he couldn't quite say what. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he felt genuinely interested in knowing more about someone. The following days were torture for Sophia. She couldn't stop thinking about the encounter in the library, about the feeling of being in Alexander's arms, about the way he had looked at her. She reread Jane Eyre every night in her small room in the servants' quarters, finding parallels between the story and her own life that both thrilled and terrified her. She knew she was crossing dangerous territory. Alexander Blackwell lived in a completely different universe. He dated models and actresses, attended galas at the Met, and his photo regularly appeared in Forbes magazine. She was just the housekeeper, invisible to most people in his world, but her heart didn't seem to understand logic. Alexander, on his part, found himself thinking about Sophia at the most inappropriate times. During board meetings, he'd catch himself remembering her soft, humming voice. At business dinners, he'd compare the artificial smiles of the women around him with Sophia's genuine expression of surprise when he'd caught her. On Wednesday, he arrived early for dinner with his mother, hoping to see Sophia again. He found her in the garden, tending to Eleanor's roses. You like gardening too? He asked, approaching. Sophia jumped, startled. Mr. Black, Alexander, I didn't hear you arrive. I came early, he said, sitting on the stone bench near the rose bushes. My mother insists these roses need special care. They're beautiful, Sophia said, carefully cutting some wilted leaves. Your mother told me they belonged to your grandmother. Yes, my grandmother Abigail planted them 50 years ago. Alexander watched Sophia work with gentle, careful hands. You're very dedicated to your work. Sophia smiled slightly. I like to do things well. My mother always said that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing right. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Sophia said softly. She passed away 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Alexander said sincerely. I lost my father 7 years ago. I know how hard it is. Sophia looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. For a moment, he wasn't the powerful CEO, but simply a man who had lost someone he loved. Is that why you came back to New York? She asked carefully. To be close to your mother? Partly, Alexander admitted, but also because I didn't know how to grieve any other way except by throwing myself into work. It was easier to deal with numbers and strategies than with feelings. And did it work? Alexander laughed bitterly. What do you think? Sophia set down her gardening shears and sat on the other end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. I think that pain doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It just waits until we're ready to face it. Her words hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. In 7 years, among all the therapists, friends, and business associates, no one had expressed such a simple and profound truth. How did you deal with your mother's loss? He asked. I cried. A lot, Sophia said honestly. I let myself feel everything. The pain, the anger, the loneliness. And then little by little I started remembering the good things, the lessons she taught me, the love she gave me. That became stronger than the pain. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the fragrance of roses and the soft sound of the fountain in the garden's center. It was an intimate moment, unexpected, that transcended all social barriers between them. Alexander! Eleanor's voice called from the house. Dinner is ready, darling. The spell was broken. Sophia quickly stood up, picking up her gardening tools. You should go. Mrs. Blackwell doesn't like to wait. Sophia, Alexander said, standing as well. Thank you for listening. She just nodded, not trusting her voice. As she watched him walk toward the house, She felt her heart tighten. She was falling in love with him, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The following weeks brought a dangerous dance between Alexander and Sophia. He began appearing at the mansion more frequently, always with plausible excuses, documents to retrieve, meetings with his mother, problems to solve. But the truth was that he was looking for opportunities to see Sophia, to talk to her, to be near her. They began meeting by chance in different parts of the house. In the library, where he'd find her reading during her lunch break. In the kitchen early in the morning, where they'd share coffee before the other servants arrived. In the garden at dusk, where they'd talk about everything and nothing. Sophia knew she should keep her distance. Every conversation, every shared smile, every accidental touch was pulling her deeper into dangerous territory. But she couldn't help herself. Alexander was different from any man she'd ever known, not because of his money or status, but because of the way he truly listened when she spoke, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her opinions and dreams. "If you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be?" Alexander asked one afternoon as they walked through Central Park. He had invited her to accompany him to pick up some books his mother had ordered, and Sophia had accepted despite knowing she was crossing lines she shouldn't. "Paris," Sophia answered without hesitation. "I've always dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower, walking along the Seine, visiting the Louvre. My mother used to tell me stories about Paris. She'd never been there, but she'd read so many books about the city that she felt she knew it by heart." "Then you should go," Alexander said simply. Sophia laughed sadly. "On a housekeeper's salary? It would take me years to save enough. Money shouldn't be an obstacle to fulfilling dreams," Alexander said seriously. "Says the billionaire?" Sophia retorted with a playful smile. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her. "I'm serious, Sophia. If I could help you—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "Alexander, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't accept something like that. It wouldn't be right." "Why not? I help people all the time through my foundation. This is different, and you know it," Sophia said softly. They were standing under a large oak tree, and the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on their faces. "Different how?" Alexander asked, taking a step closer to her. Sophia felt her heart racing. He was so close she could see the golden flecks in his green eyes. Because there's something happening between us, and we both know we shouldn't let it." "And if I don't want to stop it?" Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. "Then you'd be being selfish," Sophia said, though her voice trembled. "Your mother would never accept someone like me. Your social circle would destroy me. And your business. Alexander, the tabloids would have a field day if they knew you were involved with your family's housekeeper." "I don't care what anyone thinks," Alexander said firmly. "But I do," Sophia replied, tears shining in her eyes. "I care because I know how this world works. I've seen what happens to women like me who dare to dream beyond their station. They get chewed up and spit out. And I've worked too hard to build a dignified life to throw it all away, even for you." Alexander felt as if someone had doused him with cold water. Sophia was right, and he knew it. But knowing something and accepting it were two different things. "I should get back," Sophia said, turning away. "Mrs. Blackwell will wonder where I am." Alexander watched her walk away, feeling more frustrated than he ever had in his life. He was used to getting what he wanted: business deals, investments, acquisitions. But this was different. Sophia wasn't something he could buy or negotiate. She was a person with her own dignity, her own dreams, her own fears. And he was falling in love with her, deeply and irrevocably. The inevitable happened on a rainy Thursday night. Eleanor had traveled to the Hamptons for a weekend with friends, and most of the staff had the night off. Sophia had stayed to finish some pending tasks, planning to leave early the next morning to visit her cousin in Brooklyn. She was in the living room, adjusting the fresh flower arrangements, when she heard the front door open. Alexander entered, completely soaked from the rain, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his white shirt clinging to his body. "Alexander, what happened?" Sophia ran to get towels from the bathroom. "My car broke down 3 blocks from here," he explained, accepting the towel she offered. "And of course I chose the one day I decided not to call my driver." "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Sophia said practically. "You'll catch pneumonia." "Always taking care of others," Alexander said with a smile, but he began unbuttoning his shirt. Sophia turned away, feeling her face heat up. I'll make some tea, and there should be some of your father's old clothes in the upstairs closet. But when she tried to leave, Alexander grabbed her wrist gently. Sophia, wait. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Alexander, please. Look at me, he asked softly. When she finally turned, what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. There was desire there, yes, but also something deeper, a tenderness, a vulnerability that shook her to her core. We can't keep pretending this isn't happening, Alexander said, still holding her wrist carefully. I can't stop thinking about you. Every moment, every day. You've invaded my thoughts, my dreams, my entire life. Alexander. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. I know all the reasons why this is complicated, he continued. I know there are obstacles, practical problems, social differences, but none of that changes what I feel. I'm falling in love with you, Sophia. Actually, I think I've already fallen. Tears rolled down Sophia's face. You can't love me. You don't really know me, don't I? Alexander took a step closer. I know you're kind and hardworking. I know you read classic books and dream of Paris. I know you lost your mother and still carry that pain, but you don't let it define you. I know you have more dignity and integrity than anyone I've ever met in my so-called high society. I know that when you smile, really smile, the whole world seems brighter. What else do I need to know? You need to know that I'm terrified, Sophia admitted, her voice breaking. I'm terrified of what this could mean, of what we could lose, of how this could destroy both of us, or save both of us, Alexander said, finally closing the distance between them. He raised his hand, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. Sophia, I've spent 7 years building an empire, but I've never felt as alive as I do when I'm with you. You make me want to be a better man. Not the CEO, not the heir, just me. And if it doesn't work? Sophia asked, though she was already leaning into his touch. Then at least we'll have tried, Alexander murmured, his face inches from hers. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. When their lips finally met, it was like the world around them disappeared. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid the other might pull away. But then something broke. All the barriers, all the resistance, all the fears, and the kiss deepened, becoming urgent and desperate. Alexander pulled Sophia close, his hands tangled in her hair, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing against him as if trying to meld their bodies into one. The kiss tasted of tears and rain, of forbidden promises and impossible dreams. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. No regrets, he asked softly. Sophia opened her eyes, finding his gaze. In that moment, despite all her fears and doubts, she knew there was only one answer she could give. No regrets. The following months were the happiest and most difficult of Sophia's life. She and Alexander began a secret relationship, carefully hidden from Eleanor's eyes and the world's prying curiosity. They met in his Tribeca apartment, in small cafes in distant neighborhoods where no one would recognize them, in Central Park at dawn before the city woke up. It was an imperfect life, full of stolen moments and whispered conversations. But it was theirs, and for a while, that was enough. Alexander was a revelation. Away from the pressure of being the Blackwell heir, he was funny, caring, and surprisingly romantic. He'd leave handwritten notes for Sophia in the library books. He'd learn to cook traditional Mexican dishes so he could surprise her. He'd stay up until dawn, listening to stories about her childhood in Texas. And Sophia discovered that she could be herself with him in a way she'd never been with anyone else. She could share her dreams and fears, her opinions and ideas without worrying about being judged or dismissed. Alexander valued her intelligence, her perspective, her experience, everything that made her who she was. But reality always has a way of intruding on fairy tales. It was Victoria Ashford, Alexander's ex-girlfriend and daughter of one of the Blackwell Group's major investors, who first noticed something was different. At a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel, she observed how Alexander kept checking his phone with a distracted smile, how he seemed eager to leave early, how he glowed with a happiness she'd never seen during their 2 years of relationship. "Who is she?" Victoria asked directly, cornering him on the terrace. "I don't know what you're talking about," Alexander said, but he was a terrible liar. "Please, Alexander, I've known you for 10 years. There's a woman, and from the way you're hiding it, she's someone who wouldn't meet with your mother's approval." Victoria studied his face carefully. "Wait, it's not some actress or model, is it? It's someone even more inappropriate." "Victoria, my personal life is none of your business." "Of course it is," she said sharply. "My father invested $50 million in your last expansion. Do you really think he'd be pleased to know that the CEO of the company is involved in something that could generate a scandal? Are you threatening me?" Alexander asked, his voice turning cold. "I'm protecting you," Victoria replied. "From yourself. Alexander, whoever this woman is, end it, before it destroys everything you've built." But Alexander couldn't end it. The more he tried to imagine his life without Sophia, the emptier and more meaningless it seemed. She had become his anchor, his safe harbor, the only place where he could truly be himself. The problem was that the world wasn't ready to accept what they had. The truth was revealed in the worst possible way. A tabloid photographer, tipped off by an anonymous source, Victoria, though they'd never be able to prove it, captured Alexander and Sophia kissing in front of his apartment building at 3 in the morning. The photo went viral within hours. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO's Secret Romance with Household Staff." The photo showed Alexander in jeans and a casual shirt, holding Sophia's face tenderly as they kissed. It was a beautiful, intimate moment, transformed into public scandal. Sophia woke to dozens of calls on her phone. Her cousin, her friends, even old acquaintances from Texas. Everyone wanted to know if the photo was real. When she finally saw the image, her heart stopped. They knew. Everyone knew. Alexander called 30 seconds later. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I'm handling this. My PR team is working on a statement." "A statement?" Sophia felt numb. "What kind of statement, Alexander? Denying it? Saying I seduced you? Claiming it was just a momentary lapse?" "No, of course not." Alexander's voice was desperate. "I'm going to tell the truth, that we're together, that I love you." "And what will that accomplish?" Sophia asked, tears streaming down her face. "Your mother will be devastated. Your investors will lose confidence. And I'll be labeled as the opportunist who caught a rich man. I don't care what people say, but I do," Sophia shouted. "Alexander, I care because I have to live in this world too. I have to walk down the street and face people's judgmental looks. I have to look at myself in the mirror and know who I am." An urgent knock on her door interrupted the conversation. It was one of the other housekeepers. "Sophia, Mrs. Blackwell is on the phone. She wants to see you immediately." Sophia's heart sank. "I have to go." "Sophia, wait." But she had already hung up. The meeting with Eleanor Blackwell was as brutal as Sophia had expected. The older woman, normally so composed and elegant, was furious. "How dare you?" Eleanor hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you seduce my son, take advantage of your position in my house?" "Mrs. Blackwell, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you're not an opportunist? That you're not a gold digger who manipulated my son?" Eleanor stood up, walking around the desk in her office like a predator circling its prey. "I trusted you. I welcomed you into my home. And this is how you repay me?" "I love him," Sophia said simply, raising her head to meet Eleanor's gaze. "I never planned this. I never wanted this. But I love your son, and he loves me." "Love," Eleanor spat the word as if it were poison. "You have no idea what love means in our world, girl. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't maintain a business empire. Love doesn't protect a family name that took generations to build." "Maybe not," Sophia agreed. "But love makes life worth living. And your son has been living a half-life, being who everyone expects him to be instead of who he really is. And you think you know my son better than I do?" "I know he's lonely," Sophia said softly. "I know he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders because he thinks that's what he should do. I know he smiles at galas and events, but those smiles don't reach his eyes. I know he misses his father every day but doesn't let himself grieve because he has to be strong for everyone else." For a moment, something flickered in Eleanor's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. But then her expression hardened again. "None of that matters," she said coldly. "You're fired, obviously. I want you out of my house within the hour. And if you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from my son." "And if I don't?" Sophia asked, even though her heart was breaking. Eleanor smiled, but it was a cold, cruel smile. "Then I'll make sure every door in this city closes to you. You'll never work in New York again. You'll never be able to provide for yourself, to build the dignified life you're so proud of. I'll destroy you, Ms. Rodriguez. Make no mistake about that." Sophia left the office with her head held high, but once she reached her room, she collapsed. She packed her few belongings through tears, knowing that everything she had built over 3 years, her stability, her security, her sense of belonging, had crumbled in minutes. But worst of all was knowing that Eleanor was right. If she stayed with Alexander, she would be the one who destroyed him. His mother would turn against him. His investors would lose confidence. His business empire, everything he had worked so hard for, could collapse. She loved him too much to let that happen. Alexander found Sophia at Penn Station, about to board a train back to Texas. "Don't go," he pleaded, grabbing her hand. "Please, Sophia, don't let her win." "This isn't about winning or losing," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. "This is about doing what's right. What's right is being together," Alexander insisted. "I don't care about the business, the money, any of it. I just care about you." "But I care," Sophia said firmly. "I care because I know what you'd be giving up. Your relationship with your mother, your father's legacy, everything that makes you who you are." "You make me who I am," Alexander said desperately. "No," Sophia shook her head. "I'm just the person who helped you remember who you were. But you don't need me to be that person, Alexander. You never did." "So what? You're just going to leave?" Alexander felt anger mixing with his pain. "You're going to run away?" "I'm going to set you free," Sophia said softly. "To be the man you need to be, without the weight of this impossible choice. The only impossible choice is life without you." Sophia raised her hand to his face, memorizing every detail, the curve of his jaw, the intensity of his green eyes, the way his dark hair fell over his forehead. "You'll be okay. You're strong, Alexander, stronger than you think." "Sophia," his voice broke. "I love you," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him one last time. It was a goodbye kiss, full of everything they couldn't say. "I'll always love you, but sometimes love means letting go." Before Alexander could respond, Sophia turned and ran toward the platform. He tried to follow her, but the crowd and security stopped him. The last thing he saw was her looking back one more time before boarding the train. And then she was gone. 6 months passed. 6 months in which Alexander threw himself into work with an intensity that worried even his mother. He closed international deals, expanded the business to 3 new countries, increased the company's value by 40%. But he was hollow inside. Eleanor watched her son turn into a ghost of who he had been. He attended social events with a false smile. He dated appropriate women who bored him to tears. He was the perfect CEO, the ideal heir, and absolutely miserable. One night, after a particularly painful dinner where Alexander had barely spoken, Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. "You still love her," she said. It wasn't a question. Alexander looked at his mother, too tired to lie. "Every day, every hour, every minute. I was trying to protect you," Eleanor said softly. "From scandal, from complications, from being happy," Alexander interrupted bitterly. "From being hurt," Eleanor corrected. Your father and I married for love. Did you know? Against my parents' wishes. They said he wasn't good enough, that he didn't come from the right family. We proved them wrong, built this empire together. But it was hard, Alexander. So hard. Then why couldn't you let me try?" Alexander asked. "Because I was afraid," Eleanor admitted, and it was the first time Alexander had seen his mother show such vulnerability. "Afraid that it wouldn't work. Afraid that you'd lose everything. Afraid that you'd end up resenting her, or that she'd end up destroying you. But mostly I was afraid of losing you." "You're losing me anyway, Mother," Alexander said quietly. "I'm here, but I'm not really present. I'm alive, but I'm not living. And the worst part is that I don't even blame you. I blame myself for not fighting harder, for letting her go, for being the coward who chose comfort over courage." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she asked something that surprised both of them. "If you could have her back, what would you give up?" "Everything," Alexander answered without hesitation. "The business, The money, the name, everything. Even me? Alexander looked at his mother with sad eyes. I'd never want to choose between you and her, but if you forced me to, yes, Mom, even you. The honesty of the answer broke something in Eleanor. She had spent so long protecting her son, controlling his life, trying to ensure he didn't make the same mistakes she'd feared. But in doing so, she had robbed him of the one thing that really mattered, the freedom to choose his own happiness. Then go to her, Eleanor finally said. Go to her and bring her back. What? You heard me? Eleanor said, a sad smile on her face. Go get your girl, Alexander, before it's too late. Sophia was working at a small bookstore in Austin when Alexander found her. She had found a modest apartment, made new friends, started rebuilding her life piece by piece. But there wasn't a day that went by when she didn't think of him, didn't wonder how he was, didn't miss him with an intensity that sometimes took her breath away. The door chime rang, and Sophia looked up from the book she was organizing. When she saw who had entered, her heart stopped. Alexander looked different. He still had the same handsome face, the same green eyes, but there was something harder about him, as if the past 6 months had aged him in ways that weren't visible to the naked eye. Hi, he said simply. Alexander, Sophia whispered. What are you doing here? I came to fix the biggest mistake of my life, he said, walking toward her. I came to ask you to give me another chance. Alexander, nothing has changed. Everything has changed, he interrupted. I've changed. My mother has changed. Well, maybe not completely, he amended with a small smile, but she's willing to try. And most importantly, I've learned that life without you isn't worth living. Your business can survive a scandal. What it can't survive is having a CEO who's just going through the motions. Alexander took her hands in his. Sophia, these past 6 months have been the most successful period in the Blackwell Group's history, and also the most miserable period of my life, because none of it means anything without you. Your mother will never accept me. Actually, she sent me to find you, with her blessing. Alexander smiled at Sophia's expression of disbelief. I know, I was shocked too, but I think she finally understands that protecting me from pain isn't the same as giving me the chance to be happy. Sophia felt tears streaming down her face. I'm scared, Alexander. I'm scared this won't work, that the pressure will be too much, that we'll end up destroying each other. I'm scared too, Alexander admitted. I'm terrified, but I learned something these 6 months. Living without you is scarier than any other fear I might have. So please, Sophia, please give us another chance. Not because it'll be easy, but because it'll be worth it. Sophia looked into his eyes, those green eyes she had dreamed of every night for 6 months. She thought of all the reasons to say no, all the complications, all the challenges they would face. But then she thought of how it felt to be in his arms, how he made her laugh, how he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had, how he made her want to be brave. Okay, she finally said. Okay, let's try. Alexander's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled Sophia into his arms, holding her tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you so much. I love you too, Sophia said, finally allowing herself to believe it might be possible. The wedding was small and intimate, nothing like the grand society event everyone expected. It took place in the garden of the Blackwell mansion, among the roses that Grandmother Abigail had planted 50 years ago and that Sophia still tended with loving hands. Eleanor Blackwell, in an elegant lilac dress, walked Sophia down the aisle. It had been her idea, a symbolic gesture of acceptance that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The relationship between the two women wasn't easy. There were still tensions and disagreements, but they were trying, and that was what mattered. As Sophia walked toward Alexander, she thought of everything they had overcome to get there. The scandal had been as big as she'd feared. The media had a field day with the Cinderella story. But Alexander had faced every criticism, every judgment, every condescending comment with his head held high, and Sophia had learned to do the same. She continued working at the bookstore she'd come to love, refusing Alexander's offers to simply not work. She needed her independence, her own identity beyond being Mrs. Blackwell. Alexander not only understood, but admired her for it. When they exchanged vows under the late afternoon sun, surrounded by the people who truly mattered, Sophia knew they had made the right choice. It wouldn't always be easy. There would still be judgmental looks, whispered comments, social challenges, but they would face them together. "I promise to love you in the simple moments and the grand ones," Alexander said, holding her hands. "I promise to see you, really see you, every single day. I promise to never take for granted the gift that is your love. I promise to be worthy of the courage you showed in choosing me. Despite everything," Sophia's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke her vows. "I promise to remind you who you are when the world tries to tell you who you should be. I promise to be your safe harbor in the storms. I promise to love you not for what you have, but for who you are. And I promise to never stop believing in us, no matter what challenges we face." When they kissed, sealing their promises to each other, the applause was thunderous. But Sophia and Alexander barely heard it. In that moment, they were in their own world, a world they had fought so hard to create together. The reception was a beautiful blend of both their worlds. There was champagne and caviar, but also tamales and mariachi music that Sophia's family from Texas had brought. Guests in designer gowns danced alongside Sophia's friends from the bookstore in their simple dresses. It was chaotic and imperfect, and absolutely perfect. Late in the evening, Alexander found Sophia standing alone on the terrace, looking out at the city lights of Manhattan, twinkling in the distance. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Not even for a second," Sophia said, leaning back against him. "Just thinking about how far we've come. A year ago, I was on a train leaving everything behind, and now you're stuck with me for life," Alexander finished with a smile. "Happily stuck," Sophia corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this path? All the complications it brought?" Alexander looked at his wife, and marveled at how lucky he was. "The only thing I regret is the time we wasted being apart. Every challenge, every judgment, every difficult moment has been worth it to have you in my life. Even when your board of directors questioned your judgment? Even then. Especially then, actually. It helped me realize who my true allies were." Alexander smiled. "And it turns out, having a wife who understands the value of hard work and isn't impressed by corporate politics makes me a better CEO, not a worse one." It was true. Sophia had brought a fresh perspective to Alexander's life, both personal and professional. She had encouraged him to implement fair wage policies across all Blackwell Group companies. She had inspired a scholarship program for working-class students. She had reminded him that business success meant nothing if it came at the cost of human dignity. The company had thrived under this new approach, attracting positive press and loyal employees. The scandal that everyone feared would destroy the Blackwell name had instead humanized it, making Alexander one of the most respected young CEOs in the country. "What are you thinking about?" Sophia asked, noticing the contemplative look on his face. "About how you changed everything," Alexander said honestly. "A year and a half ago, I was going through the motions of life. Now I'm actually living it. You did that. We did that," Sophia corrected. "Together." Eleanor appeared at the terrace door, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "I hate to interrupt the newlyweds, but there are about 50 guests inside who want to toast to your happiness." Sophia started to move inside, but Eleanor stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Sophia, wait. I need to say something." Sophia felt her heart skip. Even after a year, her relationship with Eleanor was still delicate, cordial, but always with an undercurrent of tension. "I was wrong about you," Eleanor said, and the admission clearly cost her something. "I judged you based on your circumstances rather than your character. I saw a threat instead of the blessing you've been to my son, and to this family. I'm sorry for that." "Mrs. Blackwell, Eleanor, please," the older woman interrupted with a small smile. "Your family now, and I hope we can truly become family, not just in name." Sophia felt tears prickling her eyes. She had never expected a full apology, much less this offer of genuine relationship. "I'd like that very much." Eleanor surprised her by pulling her into a hug. "Take care of my son," she whispered. "He's never been happier than he is with you." "I will," Sophia promised. "And thank you for giving us your blessing, for trying. It means more than you know." As the three of them returned to the reception, Alexander took Sophia's hand, intertwining their fingers. They moved through the crowd together, greeting guests from both their worlds. His business associates and her bookstore friends, his society connections and her Texas family, his world and hers merging into something entirely new. Later that night, after the last guest had left and they were finally alone in Alexander's penthouse, now their penthouse, Sophia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, still in her wedding dress, looking out at the city that had brought them together. Alexander came up behind her, carefully beginning to undo the delicate buttons on her dress. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Blackwell?" Sophia smiled at the name. She had kept her own last name professionally, but had taken his legally, a compromise that felt right for both of them. "I'm thinking about the girl who came to New York 3 years ago, terrified and alone, looking for a better life. I'm thinking about how she could never have imagined this moment." "Do you think she'd be proud?" Alexander asked softly. "I think she'd be amazed," Sophia said, "not because of the money or the mansion or any of the external things, but because she found love, real love, the kind that doesn't ask you to be anything other than who you are, the kind that makes you braver and better and more yourself." Alexander turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "I'm the one who should be amazed. You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to. You loved me when it was difficult and complicated and potentially disastrous. You made me believe in something more than success and status. You made me believe in us. We made it, didn't we?" Sophia said softly. "Against all odds, we actually made it." "We did," Alexander agreed, leaning down to kiss her. "And this is just the beginning." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the city lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars, both Sophia and Alexander knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be challenges, society's judgments, family complications, the ongoing negotiation of two very different worlds coming together. But they also knew they had something stronger than any obstacle. They had each other. They had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to take that for granted. Sophia's journey from a small-town girl working as a housekeeper to the wife of one of New York's most eligible bachelors made headlines for months. Some saw it as a modern fairy tale. Others saw it as a cautionary tale about class barriers being crossed. But for Sophia and Alexander, it was neither. It was simply their story, messy and complicated and beautiful and real. A story about two people who found each other across a divide that seemed impossible to cross. A story about choosing love over comfort, courage over convention, hope over fear. And as far as they were concerned, it was the greatest story ever told. 3 years later, Sophia stood in the same garden where they'd been married, watching their 2-year-old daughter Abigail, named after Alexander's grandmother, toddle among the roses. Eleanor sat on a nearby bench, her stern face softened with grandmotherly love as she watched her granddaughter play. "Mama, look! Flowers!" Abigail called out, her chubby hands reaching for a red rose. "Careful, sweetheart," Sophia said, kneeling beside her daughter. "They're beautiful, but they have thorns." "Like life," Eleanor commented with a wry smile. "Beautiful, but requiring careful handling." Sophia glanced at her mother-in-law, surprised by the philosophical observation. Their relationship had evolved significantly over the years. They still had their differences. Eleanor's aristocratic expectations sometimes clashed with Sophia's more egalitarian values, but there was genuine affection between them now. "Abuela!" Abigail ran to Eleanor, climbing onto her lap. Sophia had insisted that their daughter learn Spanish and call Eleanor by the Spanish term for grandmother, a compromise Eleanor had initially resisted, but now seemed to cherish. Alexander emerged from the house, loosening his tie as he walked toward his family. At 35, he had grown even more handsome, with a few distinguished gray hairs at his temples and a contentment in his eyes that had never been there before Sophia. "How was the board meeting?" Sophia asked as he kissed her hello. "Productive. We finalized the partnership with that nonprofit you recommended, the one providing job training for low-income workers." He picked up Abigail, tossing her gently in the air as she squealed with delight. Turns out having a wife with actual real-world experience makes me a lot smarter in the boardroom. I could have told you that 3 years ago, Eleanor interjected with a rare smile. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the garden, Sophia reflected on how much had changed. She now ran a literacy foundation funded by the Blackwell Group, helping working-class adults improve their reading skills and access to education. Alexander had become known not just as a successful CEO, but as a champion of workers' rights and fair labor practices. And Eleanor had quietly become one of the foundation's biggest supporters. They had proven that love could bridge any divide, not by erasing the differences between their worlds, but by building something new that honored both. "Papa, play!" Abigail demanded, tugging at Alexander's hair. "Yes, Your Majesty," Alexander said with mock solemnity, setting her down to chase her through the garden. Sophia watched them, her heart so full it almost hurt. This was her life now. Not the one she'd imagined as a scared young woman arriving in New York with nothing but hope and determination, but something infinitely better, because she had learned the most important lesson of all, that home isn't a place or a social class or a bank account. Home is the people who see you, truly see you, and love you anyway. Home is the family you build, one brave choice at a time. And she was finally, completely home. If you made it this far, don't forget to leave your comment, your like, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you very much and see you soon.